All right. Does it say it's recording for you both?
Yes.
Perfect.
Good.
All right. Awesome. Well, we can go ahead and get started. So, welcome. My name is Dr. Eric Russell, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. And this webinar will be diving into the magic of mushrooms. And when I say that, I don't really mean like the hype or the headlines that you've seen kind of floating around on the internet. I mean the real magic, the ways that these fungi can really support our healing, our creativity, and also connection with each other when approached with intention and also respect. So I'll be blending my training and background in psychology, as well as like nearly 6 years of guiding people through this work with mushrooms through microdosing, ceremony, and also integration. So you're going to kind of get both sides of the coin. You'll get like the sciencey pieces of, working with mushrooms, but you'll also get the shamanic side, the more spiritual side as well, because I like blending them both. So I want to really just give you guys like a really grounded and honest, inspiring look at what's possible with mushrooms and to kind of clear up some of the confusion that's out there as well as some of the misinformation that I see on the web. So we'll go ahead and jump in here. So before we get into the content, I just want to set the stage. You're in the right place tonight if any of this resonates with you. You're curious about working with magic mushrooms and you want to learn how to approach them safely and confidently. You may be called to deepen your relationship with mushrooms if you haven't already. And you might think of them not just as like a substance to take, but as like sacred allies and teachers. And this is something that I go into a little bit more in depth. And maybe you're already passionate about mushrooms and their ceremonial use, but you're really wanting to understand like the wisdom and the responsibility that comes with this medicine. And then maybe you're integrating past experiences with mushrooms. Maybe you've taken past journeys or you've had ceremonies in the past, and you're really wanting to understand how you can integrate or make sense of your insights. And so, for those of you new to the experience of mushrooms, you might want some like grounded and safe knowledge around how to start working with them. And so, if any of these like really sound like you, then you're absolutely in the right place because this webinar is really designed to meet you exactly where you are, whether you're brand new to mushrooms or whether you're already walking this path. So, I want to just start with just some basics of like what exactly are mushrooms? And when we talk about magic mushrooms, for instance, we're referring to mushrooms that contain the compound called psilocybin. And psilocybin is a naturally occurring psychedelic compound that's been identified in over 180 different mushroom species. And scientists are actually discovering more of these. And once ingested, psilocybin is converted into the body into psilocin, which primarily interacts with serotonin receptors in the brain. And this is what creates like the shifts in mood and perception and awareness. And the most common species you've probably heard of is Psilobi cubensis. And this is just like the common like mushroom species that you typically see, like golden teacher, albino, and that type of stuff. But what really makes mushrooms magical or magic, in my opinion, it's not really about the trippy visuals or colors and all that stuff, although that is magical and it's great. It's really about how they can start opening us up to altered states of perception and emotion and heightened awareness. Because people often describe feeling like a greater sense of connection to themselves, to others, and to the world around them. And while the experiences can like, vary quite a bit, at their core, like mushrooms really invite us to into new ways of like seeing the world and feeling into our bodies. And that's like one of the things that I'll get into in a little bit. But here's something fun I kind of like to play with a little bit because in my experience, people don't just randomly stumble into working with mushrooms. Often there are, initial signs that mushrooms are calling your name, as I put it. The first sign that, mushrooms might be calling your name is a feeling of disconnection or stagnation in your life. Because maybe like you're someone that, you've been going about life, but it kind of feels everything is like on autopilot, everything looks fine on paper, but you might feel flat or uninspired or cut off from creativity or purpose or connection with other people. You just feel this kind of stagnation or inability to kind of get out of this funk you kind of like find yourself in. And this is usually a sign that mushrooms are typically on your path, because mushrooms are so magical and good about helping us establish more connections and see the patterns and embrace new ways of being and our creativity and purpose and all of that stuff. And so if you're feeling that type of thing, then mushrooms are an amazing ally for helping you through that process. And second, you might feel or notice a deepening connection with nature. Maybe suddenly trees and the ocean and the forest might feel more alive for you, and you can't really explain why. But the reason for this is because mushrooms are so interwoven with nature. They are nature. And so when our bodies and our spirits and our souls kind of like start gravitating towards wanting to be outside and wanting to sit under trees, hug trees, and really understand like the wider environment, this is like a sign that like we're wanting to get more in tune with nature and wanting to understand what kind of plant spirits, mushroom spirits have to offer us. And so if you feel like a connection with nature, this is typically like even for people who haven't even tried mushrooms yet and they're starting to gravitate towards wanting to be around nature more. This is kind of a sign. And the third here is a heightened sense of intuition, because you might start getting like gut feelings about things, inner nudges, or you might starting to notice like synchronicities all the time. And your psychic senses might be like on fire. And this is also a sign that mushrooms are, pretty close down the path, because when you interact with mushrooms in an intentional way, they really do heighten our sense of intuition and our psychic perception to some degree. And so when we're starting to feel this heightened intuition, particularly around going into nature and seeing like how we could start establishing more connection with it, then that's typically a sign that mushrooms are kind of pulling us in, trying to wake us up, trying to help us see and understand the connection between all things. And that's why like even people who haven't even experienced like a mushroom portal before or a journey with mushrooms, when they start feeling this like, oh, I feel like I start like experiencing a lot of synchronicities, things are kind of like, popping up and down my path that seem like, way too coincidental. And then, of course, like mushrooms are mentioned in conversation, or you hear on a podcast, or you come across it in like webinars like this. And that's like the fourth sign is like you can't constantly start hearing about mushrooms because they start popping up everywhere. It's like they keep finding their way into your awareness. And that's like a way that the mushroom spirits like initially try to communicate with you and try to help you understand that they could be a really useful ally and teacher for your healing journey. So when you notice these signs, it's like less about coincidences and more about like curiosity, because the mushroom may actually be knocking on your door to some respect, kind of inviting you to explore what they have to teach. And the reason I kind of bring up the signs is because that's kind of how it started happening for me, like early on in my journey. So a few years ago, I found myself stuck in a career that looked amazing on paper, but was quietly draining the life force out of me. For context, I was working at companies here in the Bay Area at Facebook and Airbnb. And from the outside, I was living the dream, like financial stability, a solid career path, like all the gold stars you can think of. But inside, it didn't feel aligned with my values, or came to find it wasn't aligned with my values because my life really felt like it was on autopilot. I just felt stagnant. I felt like depressed. I felt not really embodying my highest expression. Because every morning I'd wake up with this like quiet ache in my chest, this feeling that I wasn't living the life that I was supposed to be living. Um, and so inside, I was like really, really crumbling at that time. I kind of buried that ache under work, food, distractions, like convincing myself it would be okay. But deep down, I knew like I wasn't okay. Like I felt really empty and I like lost touch with that vibrant, curious version of myself that I felt like I used to be. But then 2020 hit, the year of the COVID pandemic, and in the stillness of the pandemic, something really shifted for me. I really felt called towards something completely new, which was plant medicine, specifically psilocybin mushrooms, magic mushrooms. And the experience I had with them was transformative because the medicine didn't just show me what was wrong. It showed me what I had been missing because I reconnected with like the deeply spiritual, curious part of myself that I had buried out of years of fear of judgment. Because, like, for context, I grew up in a very conservative bubble in Texas, and I learned to suppress a lot of those parts of myself, kind of afraid of being ridiculed. But the mushrooms gently began to bring all of those back for me. And so during that journey, the mushrooms didn't really like say like you should discard these parts or not pay attention to them. They said like, no, you should look at them. We should like take these and like integrate them and see like how we could make you more whole. Because they reminded me of like the joy and the wonder that I had like as a child, and they showed me that those parts of myself were worth embracing. And this process, like, it wasn't easy, and plant medicine work rarely is, but it was really liberating because it gave me like so much clarity and the courage to step into an empowered version of myself. And so plant medicine didn't really just help me heal, it really helped me transform into a whole new being. Like I went from being this like disconnected researcher working in the tech industry to like an entrepreneur and spiritual guide and someone really unafraid to speak my truth, even on topics as in our society today as taboo as plant medicine or psychedelics. Like, so embracing this path was like huge for me. But now, like I feel so much like freer and healthier and more aligned than I've ever felt before. And some people say I've even aged backwards to some extent. But and it's interesting because there was a study actually not conducted like in the past year that showed psilocybin mushrooms were able to regenerate cells, and that like they allowed cells to live 50% longer just by like ingesting psilocybin. And I thought that was such an interesting finding because I do feel like after I had like numerous journeys with psilocybin, my physical health took a turn for the better. And I really started to notice that like I just started to embrace like so much like in like I found myself so much healthier and so much more alive than I ever felt before, which was like so empowering for me. So, but I also want to touch a little bit on the history of magic mushrooms because they've been around longer than we think. So they've actually been part of like human culture for thousands of years, and across the globe, they've been used ceremonially as sacred and also relational medicine, kind of ways of connecting not only with spirit, but with the community, with nature, and with like the deeper sense of ourselves. And one of the clearest examples comes from the Mazatec people of Oaxaca, Mexico. And they worked with a species called Psilocybe mexicana in their healing ceremonies. And this was like long before any kind of Western science ever thought to pay attention to magic mushrooms. And there's also been this like really fascinating theory around ancient Egypt. And just so y'all know, like I am like obsessed with ancient Egypt and I've been to Egypt. It was amazing. But even just like walking through the walls of the temples within Egypt, I was so convinced that the ancient Egyptians really used mushrooms as like in their sacred ceremonies and even in the religious imagery that we see today on the temple walls. Because if you look closely at certain like hieroglyphs and pieces of ancient art, you can see some of the images here. You'll notice that they like resemble like you'll see shapes that many resemble resemble mushrooms. So to me, it's just like really powerful to imagine that humans have been in relationship with these medicines for not just centuries, but like millennia, because mushrooms have always been teachers for us, and we're just now remembering all of that. So before we go deeper into kind of like the ways that mushrooms speak to us and how to develop a relationship with them, I want to clear the air a little bit because there's a lot of confusion out there around mushrooms. Because when people hear the word psychedelic, they may immediately jump to stereotypes like hallucinations, party drugs, losing control, jumping out windows, like all of that stuff. And that's just a load of BS, in my opinion. It's something wrapped around a lot of the fear narrative that's around mushrooms. Because one thing I'll note though is mushrooms are not just about like escape from, our reality and just like, having fun, although mushrooms can be used for fun, and I'll talk about that here. They're they're really about like using them intentionally, and they're not really about chasing like the crazy visuals or the quick fixes, all like how a lot of people kind of think of mushrooms. They're really more of a teacher and a sacred ally. So I can go through some of the misconceptions here. And so, like, the number one misconception of magic mushrooms is it's a recreational drug. Um, Now, I'll be real, people can use mushrooms recreationally. Um, and I don't judge them for that. I've used them recreationally before in the past. But reducing them to just a drug, like that word drug, in my opinion, is just very loaded, completely insults like their potential as profound healing allies and teachers, because these mushrooms, fungi, they've been used for centuries in tons of spiritual traditions and ceremonies designed to release old patterns and reconnect with spirit. This is like the essence of mushroom and how they've been used like through centuries. And so their deeper purpose isn't about escape or entertainment. It's really about healing and self-discovery, but also how can we integrate their insights into our daily lives to make like our lives better. And like, so I'll talk a little bit about my path. So I had my kind of breakthrough experience with mushrooms like early on. But one of the truths I'll share from my own path is like much of my experiences with mushrooms earlier on did begin in a recreational way. I had my big, experience, and then I, started experimenting and taking them at festivals and all of that stuff. But the medicine kind of revealed something more to me during this time. Kind of the fun kind of gave way to the insight that I can start using mushrooms or working with them to help me gain more perspective and insight on myself and how I can actually heal my body and my mind. And so I realized like the depth of what these mushrooms were offering during this time. So, yes, you can take them lightly, and I definitely don't judge people for doing that. But when you choose to approach them with like intention and respect, that's really when their magic starts to unfold. Another common misconception is that mushrooms are a last resort medicine, something that you only turn to when everything else has failed or you've hit like a rock bottom. But plant medicine, specifically mushrooms, aren't about fixing something that's broken. It's really about helping you reconnect with yourself. And so these mushrooms meet you exactly where you are, whether you're struggling with anxiety or you're outwardly successful, but like inwardly craving some deeper meaning. Because they help illuminate the next layer of growth that's like ready to unfold for you, because I've worked with tons of like leaders and entrepreneurs in their spaces who felt like they had everything figured out. They're very like type A, very organized, very driven individuals who are very successful. But mushrooms help them kind of reconnect with a deeper sense of their purpose and authenticity that really no achievement in the past could have given them, because they started realizing like what's more important for their lives, what they want, ultimately, what do they want to prioritize giving energy to? So you really don't have to be at rock bottom to step onto this path, because mushrooms are not about survival. It's really about expansion and, starting to gain clarity around who you really are. And that's, where they work the best. And so let's address the other misconception on the other side of the other side of the spectrum, which is it's a magic solution. So this is kind of misleading because we call them magic mushrooms, and so they're of course magic, right? And yes, they're powerful. Yes, they can feel magical, but they're not a magic fix or they're not a magic cure, because mushrooms don't do the work for you. They kind of walk beside you as allies, kind of opening doors and showing you what's possible for your life. But it's really up to you to step through those doors, because the ceremony or the journey with mushrooms is just the beginning. It's like the real changes, the transformation, the healing really happens after the you have your journey with mushrooms, and that's like through integration work. And that's why I'm an integration coach, because I find so much value in helping people make sense of those insights and start embodying them throughout like their day and their lives. And that means like taking the insights and weaving them into your daily life. It's like, it means like journaling, reflecting, like setting new intentions, and kind of making those small but meaningful shifts in how you like work, live, relate to yourself, like create new relationships, all of that stuff. Because you might uncover powerful truths during a mushroom ceremony, but unless you take action on them, they just kind of remain like ideas. So, like again, like mushrooms really work with you, not for you. And that's really what makes the healing last with them. All right. So now that we've gone into some of the misconceptions, I'd love to shift gears a little bit into something a little bit more mystical, but also a little bit more practical with mushrooms. Because one of the most common questions I get is like, how do mushrooms like communicate with us? Like, what does it mean for people to say the medicine is teaching them something? Because the truth is, mushrooms have their own unique way of working with us. And while it might not be like communication in the way that we think it is, like, for example, like texting or emailing people or talking on the phone, like, sure, that's like our standard way of communicating, but there's a whole different new language we have to understand when it comes to mushroom communication, because there are like really clear and consistent ways people experience the messages of this medicine. And the first way mushrooms usually communicate with us, usually in ceremony, is through our emotions. What's interesting is that the ancient Egyptians actually believed emotions were messages from the divine. And honestly, like, I think they were onto something, because that's very much how the spirit of the mushrooms kind of speaks to us. Because when you're on a mushroom journey, it's like like tuning your frequency to theirs, because you become more attuned to the information that they're sharing. And the primary channel they use is like your body and your emotions. So if you suddenly feel like during an experience like anxious or on edge, that's usually not random. It may be a signal to like ground yourself, breathe, come back to center, investigate kind of where that fear is coming from, and it may have like a relationship to what's going on around you. So it's like the emotions really point your compass towards like where you should really be listening to the spirits of the mushrooms. Because another one is this: if you feel overwhelmed with love or joy or awe, that's often like the medicine guiding you towards a deeper connection. Because with mushrooms, they love, connecting you with nature and the divine and everything. Like they're connector beings. And so they really are speaking to us through these emotions that we experience. So the key is like mushroom communication is often feeling based, not really analytical. So if you find yourself like really overthinking or analyzing things or trying to figure things out on mushrooms, that's usually not the mushrooms communicating with you. That's like you kind of in your head trying to figure out what's going on, and you'll drive yourself crazy to some extent doing that like on a mushroom journey. But that's usually a sign that like you're either not listening or you're not attuned to like what the mushrooms are trying to communicate to you. So listening to mushrooms often means feeling through your body. And so speaking of body, the second way mushrooms communicate through us is through the physical body, because mushrooms carry a very root chakra energy, because they ground us and they root us to the earth and they invite us to reconnect with our physical selves to some extent. So, this is why movement can be so important during a journey or a ceremony, because when you walk, dance, or stretch, you're not just moving your body, you're allowing kind of the energy and the messages from the medicine to kind of flow more freely. And I can kind of give an example because I recently did a journey where I took a certain varietal of mushroom, and at first it wasn't doing anything. Like I could feel it very subtly, but I took like a good amount and I was like, I don't know why this mushroom isn't doing anything. I'm not really getting anything. But as soon as I started stretching and moving my body and doing down dog and like doing like these yoga poses, I started getting communication from the mushroom. And so it's really just involved sometimes like moving our body and moving the energy throughout, because that's where tools like breath work come in too. Because with every inhale and exhale, you're kind of cycling that energy in and out, kind of creating that space for new insights and new clarity to emerge. And again, like I mentioned, yoga is amazing to do on a journey, especially for mushrooms who are very like open to movement. And I would say most mushrooms are kind of open to movement, and you can get new insights the way the in some ways that you can like stretch your body or kind of position yourself in a different way. But I would say there are some varietals that are more movement based than others, and that's a whole class within itself. But I would say on average across most mushroom species, it really helps to move your body to start like downloading like different types of insights. And the third way that mushrooms communicate is through visions and imagery. Because you may have heard of those kind of wild and trippy visions that you see on mushrooms, and they're really not random shapes that your brain is generating. They're actually, because many traditions believe that these sacred codes, that symbols and messages that mushrooms are really embedding into your consciousness, because sometimes they show up as, sacred geometry, sometimes as faces, sometimes as these mushroom-like beings, because you might see like animals like a cat or a bright white light, but the question isn't like what you saw necessarily, it's like what you felt when you saw it. So this is like kind of combining like the emotional aspect of mushrooms with like what you're actually visually seeing. And that's really where like the real meaning lies, because these images are really personal for everyone. They're not real always universal symbols. They're part of like our own unique dialogue with the medicine. Because one of the best ways to actually capture and integrate these messages is to start drawing or painting them during a journey or after a journey. It doesn't matter if you're good at drawing or not. Like I feel like I suck at drawing, but I typically try to like sketch or draw kind of what I'm seeing on a journey, because then I can relate that symbol or something around that shape to maybe something later in a journey that comes up. So it really helps to start to put things on paper, because a lot of those symbols are meaningful, can be very meaningful. And the cool part is like you're not just using your eyes here, like you're using a blend of all of your intuitive senses, uh like clairvoyance, yes, like for sure. Like you're starting to become more aware of different types of visual perception, but also like you could start hearing things. You could start like feeling interesting things like through clairaudience or clairsentience. Like so all of the psychic senses, all of the clairs start like coming online like when you're on mushrooms, because they're like so hyper perceptive. Like you start to really start making sense of what kind of the mushrooms are sharing through emotions, bodily movement, but also kind of the particular symbols that they're showing you in your kind of third eye vision, as I call it. So now I want to touch really briefly on the transformative potential of magic mushrooms, and this is really where the power and the beauty of mushrooms start to really shine. Because plant medicine, and specifically mushrooms, is not only healing, it's very healing, but not only healing, but really transformational, because it can really transform your understanding of barriers holding you back in life. They allow you to really shed old patterns and really step into your personal power, because they really support our mental and physical and spiritual well-being, because they really help us start aligning with our authentic selves and kind of throw away all of those like narratives that we've kind of kind of attached to ourselves throughout our lives. And so I would say mushrooms are very much about sovereignty, because they help us realize that we are the medicine, like, which is like a huge truth, that we are our own healers and alchemists and intuitive guides to some extent. They teach us that we have way more power and authority and autonomy than we've been taught to believe. So they really teach us that, they can heal us, yes, but they really start to teach us how to heal ourselves and how to transform into new and better ways of being. That's really the huge transformational magical piece of mushrooms, in my opinion. And I can kind of relate this to an example here. So if you think about it, mushrooms are the original alchemists in nature, because they take what is rotting and dying or decomposing on the forest floor and recycle it into new life. Because without them, the decay would just sit there in nature, kind of stagnant or unresolved. But instead, mushrooms break it down and recycle it into our atmosphere to be used for new life. And in fact, that's why I have the death card from the tarot here in the slide, because I've been recently learning the tarot on my own. So I thought it would be kind of applicable here. But just like death, mushrooms assist with the transition process, the ending of an old way of life and beginning a new way of life. Speaking of like the most recent eclipse season we've been in, I think it's very much this. It's like kind of shedding the old, bringing in the new, and that's exactly what they do within us. Because just like mushrooms break down what is dying in the forest, They also help us decompose old emotional wounds, kind of turning what was heavy into lightness and what was stagnant into actual kind of movement and flow. So mushrooms don't really just heal us. They really teach us how to transform stagnant energies that no longer serve us. And for me, through a process of transformation, they showed me not only how to heal my own energy and my body, which I had been trained in Reiki like a few years ago. They really showed me how I can start taking that energy and feeling into it and transforming it into something much more empowering for me, which really led me to completely shifting my identity into a completely new way of being and living and thinking, all of that stuff. Um, and so, in essence, what they've kind of taught me in a way, this is kind of like what the mushrooms, the ultimate thing they've really taught me is this analogy. A caterpillar who crawls on the ground is constantly at risk of being stepped on by animals, by people, by anything. Because even if it's stepped on and it survives, even if it heals from being stepped on once, the threat of being stepped on still remains, right? Because they still crawl on the ground. They are they have potential to being stepped on again and again. And so they have to heal from that wound again and again, like because they crawl on the ground. But once that caterpillar becomes a butterfly, that risk is gone because it doesn't need to heal from the same wound again because it's no longer the same creature. It flies, so it doesn't have to worry about being stepped on and having to heal from that wound of being stepped on because it flies, right? So that's the power, the transformative power that mushrooms can offer. It's not just like a healing or a recovery, it's like a rebirth. They can help us build a completely new identity that's more whole and more embodied and far more aligned with who you are and who you want and are meant to become. And but of course, this transformation doesn't really happen automatically. It requires like deep integration and embodiment and working with the mushrooms again and again to really start making sense of those insights and start embodying them and into a new way of living. So you can take the messages that mushrooms offer you, kind of the insights, the aha moments, and the remembering. But until you start weaving those into your daily life and start integrating those, um, that like that's where the magic really is starting to make sense of all of those insights and start weaving them into your life. Like until you start doing that, that's really when you start to see the magic. But I see many people going into ceremony after ceremony after ceremony and getting kind of that initial like mushroom high and going into kind of that world again and again because they enjoy it, but they're not taking anything that the mushrooms are like teaching them and applying it to their daily lives. And that's why they go back, and that's why they go back, and that's why they go back because they're, so they can become dependent upon the mushrooms. And so to avoid that, it's really critical to start understanding how we can start learning from what we're experiencing in the mushroom journey, and then start applying those insights to make positive changes to our lives. So that's really what I'm passionate about, and something that I've actually had firsthand experience with in my own journey was like being able to do that with the mushroom spirits. Um, and so I would say like mushrooms are, my bread and butter. I love working with them so much. They're like a beautiful, beautiful medicine. And if you really want to learn more about how to work with these magical beings in like a deeper way, I'm teaching a magic mushroom mystery school course next month. Coming up, it's like I think in like 2.5 weeks starting, but this is really a course to really dive deeper into all of the different topics that we kind of touched on today, like the embodiment of the insights, the transformation, the how mushrooms communicate with us, the history, all of that stuff. And I would say the really cool thing about this course is that I feel like mushrooms are such a unique and interesting species of psychedelic and plant medicine, kind of unlike like ayahuasca or even San Pedro, they're kind of like their own kind of unique class. They provide so much unique benefit, especially for people who are looking for that deeper alchemy and that kind of transformative potential that they could offer. They can also offer like, really fun journeys and extremely wonderful experiences healing the inner child. And that's something that a lot of people who have taken this course were really interested around, like how can we go deeper with like the mushroom spirits. And so that's something that we'll dive into with the course. Starting with week one, of course, we'll talk about like the foundations of working with mushrooms, the history, kind of diving a little bit deeper into some of those theories, like ancient Egypt, for example, and how they work with them in Mexico. And then we'll go into kind of honoring the traditions and how we can start working with mushrooms in our kind of modern environment. How can we start like respecting the lineages and like all of that stuff working with mushrooms? And then we'll talk about decoding the language of mushrooms. So we talked about like the different types of ways mushrooms communicate to us, but how can we start actually decoding the language that mushrooms kind of give to us in certain types of journeys, and how can we start to make sense of them in our own journey. So we'll kind of dive into that in week three. And week four, we'll be navigating a lot of the stuff around like the depths and challenging experiences, like ego deaths, like ego dissolutions, like how to navigate like heroic doses of mushrooms, and like what does that mean, and how to get like really powerful results and transformative like magic, in my opinion, from those experiences. And so we'll be touching on a lot of that in the last few weeks, but then of course week five will go into how to integrate and embody all of this wisdom that they provide us. And then, of course, we'll end the course with a celebratory cacao ceremony for some of the folks in the cohort to connect. And because I find like people in this space, like I really do value people being able to make like connections with one another, especially in this space, because it's a space that like doesn't have that much like information around it. So I find like having that community component around this course is really important as well. So if this is something that interests you, or you want to like learn more about this course, I really invite you to join us on this magical adventure, because classes start on Wednesday in October. And if you're interested in signing up, we have a 20% off discount code. I think there's two codes floating out there right now. One is Mush Love and the other one is Magic. And you'll get at least like 20% off if you apply one of those codes to signing up for the course. But that's really all I have. I want to open it up for Q&A. If y'all have any questions around anything that I talked about today, or if you have any more questions around like the upcoming course. But yeah, I'll just open it up, and I just want to thank you all so much for joining me today. I just want to say I love mushrooms with all my heart, and I'm so glad that you all are interested in working with them potentially. So
I do have a question.
yes, please.
I'm a plant medicine integration coach. I help with retreats in Costa Rica with women. Um, and the biggest issue I find is you can educate and educate about the integration, but so many people want to bypass that part. And then a year later, when they come back, if they come back for another retreat after working with psilocybin, then they say it's been so challenging, and yet they didn't reach out. Now, in your practice, are you running into that too? It's like I educate at these retreats. I do a whole workshop on setting intentions and the importance of integration. It's just if you leave and go back to the same patterns, it's not going to work. But it's a really challenging. It doesn't even matter what kind of group you're working with, but there's only a couple out of each retreat that take that seriously and really work through all the challenges that come along. And you can tell them journal and do all this, but I think we're just in a quick fix society where people just want, okay, I want to go to the ceremony and then I want to, okay, have this experience, but when it comes to doing the work,
Hmm.
and I don't know, do you have any tricks?
Yeah, that's a great question. I find myself in the same boat sometimes with the people that I work with and people I talk to, because that's very common. Like people tend to, gravitate towards the quick fix when it comes to, using mushrooms. They typically go to the mushrooms to knock out all the cobwebs, as people have put it. And then they're like, "Oh, I'm great." And then like a month goes by and then they're like, "Oh, I need another mushroom ceremony now."
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
and then they like bypass the actual work that and the actual communication that the mushrooms are kind of conveying to us in the actual ceremony. So in a way, like I feel like bypassing, like spiritually bypassing or not taking the doing the work after the experience is kind of an insult to the mushrooms because they are
Mhm.
communicating with us. They're like, here's like what's going on, like here's how you can like really address it, here's how you can learn from it, but we have to be the ones like to actually take that information and start applying it in our lives to like make positive change. And that's the tricky part because a lot of people are inherently lazy. So we typically don't like doing the work or the hard work required after a ceremony to actually get transformative results because that's what a lot of people are missing is the embodiment, I would say. It's like
Mhm.
embodying the wisdom, actually like taking the wisdom and embodying it and actually living it, not
Yeah.
just like making sense of it and being like, "Oh, that's a cool idea. That's awesome." And then like days go by and you don't do anything with it. That's kind of the spiritually bypassing folks that I typically see out there as well. And it is tempting, it is very tempting to start to chase ceremony after ceremony and not really be grounded in the insight or the embodiment like gained from the ceremony. And so usually what I've found that really helps is keeping people accountable. And it's it's hard
Right.
because like, you want to work with clients, you don't want to like scare them away with like all this work, but that's really what it requires, to be honest. It requires that, dedication and that devotion. And if people aren't willing to give that, then they're not going to get transformative results. I'm just going to say that right now. It
Right.
it just like really has to I think when it comes to integration, accountability is really key. Like having people really understand up front that if this is what you want from the journey, this is what to expect.
Mhm.
And this is the type of accountability that you will need to kind of go further and actually embody that transformation. So it's really about setting those expectations up front around the work and then really sometimes like keeping people accountable. Like maybe after the retreat, for example, you have like, weekly, group integration calls and maybe even I know this sounds silly, but setting some like reward system from like coming and integrating and stuff like that to kind of get people more motivated
Mhm.
in that
Yeah.
space. But I would say, yeah, I will validate that it is hard because people do gravitate towards the quick fixes, but it's up to us as educators to tell people that it isn't really a quick fix. It's like
Mhm.
it's a transformative tool that requires you to meet it halfway.
Yeah. And the medicine journey is only a part of it, but what I found, I just did one Saturday. I worked with a
Mm.
mushroom called avalanche. I did a one-on-one
Oh,
ceremony.
cool.
Um, but what I find is it continues to work with you for such a long period of time afterwards. And, I do stress that with clients because it continues to work with you and talk to you in dreams and symbols. I mean, I'm still have
Hmm.
all these symbols coming in and epiphanies. And I do have integration set up, integration calls for the next few weeks. But when I first started working with the mushrooms, it was like I didn't have integration. It wasn't
Hmm.
really on the radar the
Yeah.
first time I did it. And I could have benefited so much more, with all the little nuances that you can mirror back to someone. So I love what you're doing. And I love the way you're taking it on.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I just love this space, and I think people really just have so much benefit from like, being more educated around this space and how these can be, not only healing but transformative tools. And
Yeah.
so I completely agree with you. I've seen that myself around kind of the people who, just hit up ceremony after ceremony, but really don't do anything about it afterwards. And I would say that that's something as for us guides and integration coaches to be start getting creative, and how can we start supporting those people and through that time event through those seasons of integration work. And usually when I think of integration, I really think about how are people's relationships with other people changing, and how are your social circles? How are you relating to other people in a different way? Because that's usually where where I'm seeing more people be quote unquote successful with integration and embodiment. They're embodying the wisdom. They're starting to release and cut ties with people who are not healthy for them.
Mhm.
And that's really, integrating a lot of wisdom from the mushrooms and starting to like really see yourself as this really respectable being, and starting to really shift how you relate to other people based on kind of the wisdom of the medicine. So that's kind of how I really think of how are you embodying, how are you integrating all of that stuff for sure.
And you also do work with people afterwards with microdosing.
I do. Yeah. Yeah. I think microdosing is also a very important tool, or should I say method to helping people really recalibrate their emotional and nervous systems to cope with kind of the stresses of life, and how they can embody more creative wisdom. And that's a really I love microdosing because you can still be rooted and grounded on earth, but still
Mhm.
experience the psychedelic headspace in a way where you can start to channel those insights a lot more cleaner and clearer. And that's really one benefit of doing microdosing. And also I call mini journeys, in my opinion, like journeys with like lower amounts of psilocybin, to really help you start anchoring in insights without kind of being blasted off into infinity, because being detached from your
Yeah.
body. So that's kind of how I think about it as well.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate everything that you've shared today. And when it comes to microdosing, I'm a nurse, but I don't,
Hmm.
that's not my specialty. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna take down your information
Yes, please.
because I have a lot of people that are interested in it, but they don't want to just go to anybody. But with doctor, just like nurse, in front, with your title.
Hmm.
Doctor, people have a little bit more, like people who are scared to microdose,
Yeah.
have a little more confidence in that. Because
Hmm.
I've recommended it, but people are scared. Like you
Yeah,
said, they still think it's a drug.
totally.
Um, but working in the medical field for 40 years, I'd much rather go this route.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
totally, totally. I totally agree. it helps having those like professional credentials and like the education and all of that stuff. But I just love educating people around like the truths and like, calling out
Yeah,
the misconceptions. And I think that's like half the work, for these these people who are interested in microdosing. So yeah, I totally agree.
very good. Well,
Yeah.
thank you. This
Thank
is
you, Ellen.
really good.
Yeah, yes, of course. Let's see. I'll call on RV.
Hi there.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi. I was super. I was just wondering what your personal opinion is about the difference between mushrooms and ayahuasca or other plant medicines, because you
Yeah, yeah.
mentioned that you felt they were different, and I would love to get your take on it. Thank
Yeah, yeah.
you.
So I I would say they each have their own specialty or gift in a way, how I put it. They each have their own individual kind of personality. I would say mushrooms are a little bit different than working with ayahuasca because ayahuasca goes very in depth and helps like really root out potentially emotional trauma, sexual trauma, like all of those different like really embedded um, I guess situations that we've like experienced before in the past, or help us like untangle and look at kind of the darker aspects that we may not really want to look at. And it's a more intense and uh I guess immersive experience compared to mushrooms. Because mushrooms you can kind of um mushrooms are a little bit more versatile. You can do microdosing with mushrooms. You can do mini journeys with mushrooms. You could like control the dosage level, and it's kind of like a linear path. So like, you can take, you know, like a gram of mushrooms, 3 grams of mushrooms, 5 grams of mushrooms, and the more you take, it kind of becomes this like linear path, like you know what you're going to get, and so you can kind of calibrate like kind of what experience you want with mushrooms. With ayahuasca, it's not really like that. You kind of take cups of ayahuasca during a ceremony, and one cup can blast you to infinity, but sometimes people take 3 cups and nothing happens. So it's very unpredictable, ayahuasca, but I would say psilocybin, magic mushrooms, has its own um, really magic around helping us understand our inner child, helping us experience wonder and play and fun and enjoyment, and how we can bring more of that into our lives and help alchemize a lot of like the fear that we experience in situations, the doubt, the barriers that kind of get in our way. They help us like understand how we can just alchemize those or turn them more into light experiences. That doesn't mean every experience with mushrooms is going to be light and fun, of course, because sometimes mushrooms, as I put it, sometimes can be like these trickster spirits that can like come in and show us something kind of like an ayahuasca experience, but they can also be playful and fun at the same time. Um, Usually, ayahuasca is not so much like a playful and fun spirit. I mean, she can have her moments, but I would say it's really the spirit feels a lot more feminine from the earth, a lot more intense. Whereas like mushrooms can be a little bit more lighthearted. It's more of like a they spirit. There's like like what I experience is like there's multiple different types of entities that are like kind of communicating to you. So I call it like a they spirit, whereas like ayahuasca is like a her or a she, like a very feminine presence. So like it's it the characterizations and the feeling of each medicine is different in their own way. And then San Pedro is its own little own experience as well, where that kind of feels more masculine and grandfather energy, but also very heart-centered. It's great for processing grief or allowing you to open up your heart space um, to new types of relationships, new experiences of love and connection. And that's like really something powerful that San Pedro can like really open, or Wachuma is another word for San Pedro as well. Whereas mushrooms are a little bit more versatile. That's why I love working with mushrooms, because they can provide like a really deep experience, something that like gets you into your potentially fears and helps you like process emotional trauma, but it can also provide you this more light and empowering experience as well. So it's the versatility, I think, of mushrooms that make it such a unique medicine to work with. And so I've had so much experience working now with mushrooms, both in a microdosing and macrodosing capacity, that I really enjoy getting to know how the spirit kind of like comes in and starts working with us, even when we might not even be on the medicine yet. So I think that's kind of like a cool part about working with mushrooms too. I hope that answers like your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've I've definitely had very different experiences, and I find it's really precious to hear multiple points of view and takes, and the way that each spirit presents itself to each person, and also the ways in which we have the most facility to work with them.
Mm,
Um, Personally, and also I'm thinking because they're intelligent entities. I personally think they're bodhisattvic beings, like all plant spirits of that power. Um,
mm,
I think that like they're able to really calibrate what each individual needs at that time. And I have no doubt that they have a greater mission here in like Western culture, um, with backgrounds, analytic backgrounds, reaching, as the previous speaker said, many people who
mm.
might not be open to animist beliefs and understanding. But yeah, and I think it's beautiful the work that you've done and that you've chosen to do, and how those credentials can get you into places where this medicine wouldn't have always been able to go. And I feel like there's such a partnership with all these medicines of like our own personal paths, and how we're able to bring that into the greater whole. So yeah, that I felt called to bring that to everybody. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, thank you so much. I love that reflection. When you were talking about partnership, it kind of reminded me of an earlier mushroom journey I had, where I was getting to know the spirit of the mushrooms, particularly the albino mushroom spirit. And like, depending on the types of mushrooms that you work with, there's like a variety of different types of mushroom spirit, depending on like the strain that you get. But I was working with the albino strain, and I received this download that saying that like, we're partners here. And I'm like, oh, I guess we are partners. We're partners in helping us like expand consciousness in a way that helps really expand our awareness and perception of like of nature and our existence, and connection with all. And so I think the partnering with the mushroom spirits and partnering with ayahuasca, partnering with all these plant medicines is really the key to understanding how we could, um, meet them halfway and not have them, do so much work for us. They are all about like helping us realize the work that we have for ourselves. Um, and I kind of think of this analogy, actually, like think about like a dark basement room, which is your subconscious, and it's dark. There's no lighting in there. And you have a flashlight, which is a psychedelic, ayahuasca, psilocybin. You shine the flashlight in the basement, you start to see all the shit that's in the basement. You're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I had all this shit in the basement. Um, but the flashlight isn't going to get the shit out of the basement. You're going to get the shit out of the basement, right? So that's really like an analogy or a metaphor for actually doing integration work. It's actually clearing out that basement because ayahuasca, psilocybin, it's not going to clear out the basement for you. It's going to show you what's in the basement, but it's not going to, get that shit out of the basement for you. So that's that's how I kind of think about working with these medicines. They really help us. They're like unique allies and spirits that help us in our own journey, but we have to do the work to meet them halfway.
I wonder if there's space for me to make this reflection. I've been able with success to work with these medicines in such a way that they where it's very shamanic and very magical and using like um, great mother void energy, where miracles really can happen. Things can get completely deleted, uh,
Mm,
uh, genetically or through one's psyche, to those places, and for sure hard work, in much more mundane levels of like understanding where we're at and clearing out the basement. And I think it's very exciting to know that after a while you do get help. You do get a nice gust of wind, if you
hmm
meet halfway, as you're saying. um, don't discount magic, don't discount miracles, that those energies really do exist.
Yeah, yeah,
Blessings to everybody.
yeah, thank you so much, RV. Yeah, I truly believe that, not only are mushrooms like magic in my opinion, but like we're magic. They're showing us that we're magic too. So like again, it's meeting them halfway and knowing that like we're in partnership, we can create magic together. So I think that's like a really beautiful thing about working with plant medicines too. So I really appreciate your reflection. Yeah, Deepa, sorry, you've been patiently waiting.
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I'm using phone because my internet was not great in the computer. So, uh, yeah, this is a uh, little nervous, by the way, because I'm not into so much of plant medicine, and I been having a little bit of curiosity going on with mushroom, as mushroom showed in my environment.
Mhm.
Saw a lot of mushroom near my mom's place. And anyway, so they may be quietly talking to me, but I was just interested in mushroom in general, though, like adaptogen, like VC and all. I think I am taking that right now,
Yeah.
just for my nervous system, and I'm just like, I don't know, immune health and immunity and all. So this is a little, I was not really ready for the psilocybin one, but I was curious because I have the fear of like, okay, I don't want to take any drugs. I don't
Mhm.
like you know, my dad had a smoking problem, addiction in a way. And I was like, I never want to be that way, or maybe I'm scared, like I will be that if I smoke. Not in that, like will be that, but I'm like, and there's a lot of fear with like, codependency or addiction that
Mhm.
that I probably thought like I might have if I smoke or something. And I know it's just like a little personal, but yeah, it's a little nervous in that sense, that way. But
Mhm.
sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Anyway, I was curious about the mental health aspect, how this psilocybin thing can, help with the mental health. Could be PTSD, OCD, or anxiety. Similar problem, like how do you think it helps with it? And I think what I really, really am interested in aspect wise is nervous system, like, trauma and all. Like, do
Mhm.
you know that it helps with that, where you want to step into a next level of your life, but you're scared because you're held back with something?
Mm. Yeah, those are great questions. The first one that I'll answer is the healing potential of mushrooms, even from a scientific perspective. So to like ground everyone a little bit more into the science perspective, because I got my PhD in psychology. I value the science, obviously. So I like when it comes to how mushrooms can, help us with our mental health and anxiety, depression, PTSD, and all of that stuff. They modulate what's in our brain called the serotonin receptors. So they attach to the what is called the 5-HT2A receptors in our brain on our neurons, and then help modulate serotonin uptake in the on the neurons. And that basically allows our neurons over time to be more wired to create new connections and new neural pathways. Because sometimes, like when we're in depression, or when we have depression, or we're kind of in states of post-traumatic stress and stuff like that, we have very strong neural wiring in our brain. Like it's very tight. But like using psilocybin, the basically what occurs at a very like fundamental level is that it allows the neurons to start branching out and forming new connections to other neurons, which breaks that pattern or that loop of anxiety, depression, kind of like running our lives all the time, because we can't get out of that kind of that loop, because our neural net is so non-plastic. It's like it's not moving. And so the thing that is really revolutionary about psilocybin that they're finding on a scientific level is the ability for it to modulate and increase neuroplasticity in the brain, which is the ability for neurons to form new connections with other neurons, which helps us break out of cycles of depression and anxiety and all of that stuff, because we're starting to rewire and create new associations for things. That's why that they're finding it so revolutionary for stuff like PTSD, because we're kind of we're so tightly wired to thinking of a stimulus as a threat. But what the psilocybin, and even like in MDMA trials, which is like a really strong empathogen that they're finding, is helping break up that kind of those connections in the brain, which helps form new connections, therefore allows us to associate new things with certain stimuli. And so we're not constantly feeling like at threat or having that heightened anxiety around certain things and certain situations. And so that in a very like tight nutshell is kind of what is occurring on like the kind of a neuroscience level in the brain, that what's going on. And even at like a shamanic level, they've been using like mushrooms. They've kind of known like mushrooms and plant medicines, all of that stuff have been used for centuries in healing traditions and helping the mentally ill, or should I say mentally injured, or the people that have certain like conditions, and helping them like break free of those things. Like it's been used for centuries throughout like different cultures around the world and indigenous traditions. And so even before the Western deemed it as like this drug, it's really been a part of nature, helping us like break free of kind of toxic cycles and patterns that we find ourselves in. So that's kind of an example of how psilocybin, but also plant medicines in general, can really help us from a mental health aspect.
Do you think it will help you heal? Like, well, where you were saying ayahuasca. I think what I am interested really is really nervous system, where
Mm,
it's kind of very popular nowadays. And I know that, nervous system is something that you need to anchor whatever your new reality and all in the body level too. It's not just mind and just like, vision level. But that's why I'm like into nervous system and, like really having, how do you call it, ease in receiving whatever I'm trying to receive. But
Mhm.
but I was just curious because with ayahuasca, you said it's like, more targeted toward trauma or like healing of the trauma and all, and then it goes quite deep. So does it help assist in healing it rather than just the serotonin and the neural pathways only, or does it help with maybe revealing something that is in the shadows and that is like you need to kind of maybe make a new relationship with what is going on? Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, so that's kind of like ayahuasca's bread and butter. She kind of illuminates things that we don't want to look at a conscious level. So she like dives into our subconscious and kind of finds the box that says "Don't look here," and then she's like, "Ooh, what's this?" And then like opens it up and like blasts us with this thing that we're just like, "Oh my God, why are you doing this?" But it's like she's illuminating things that we're not even wanting to look at, which might be for our highest good and healing. But the actual process itself can sometimes surprise you with how deep she can get. And of course, that's healing in the end. But like during the actual experience, it might actually like be very overwhelming or very like, in the depths. And so I would say like people who do ayahuasca have to be very brave and know kind of what they're getting themselves into. And it is, of course, like always a positive result in the end, in my opinion, with ayahuasca. But it's just like going through that process is sometimes jarring. But when it comes to like the nervous system and regulating the nervous system, I've actually found microdosing to be actually very profound in helping people um, start to regulate their nervous systems. And in fact, I have a client right now who that's like her main challenge is like, how can I stay calm in tense situations at work, and how can I keep my nervous system kind of regulated in those environments. And so she's actually finding that microdosing psilocybin or magic mushrooms is actually really helping her kind of nervous system stay out of that sympathetic state, which is kind of fight or flight, but kind of stay in kind of the parasympathetic state, which is, rest, digest, like calmly approach situations, not get overwhelmed by them. And so slowly but surely, our bodies start to learn over time that we can feel safe in those situations, because it's the microdosing days or the psilocybin has kind of been allowing us to train our bodies that we can feel safe in those environments. And then the integration work after the microdosing kind of even helps more and helps anchor like how we can start to feel safe in the long term without the need for the medicine, if that makes sense.
Yeah, would that means that it will heal it also, the trauma or whatever, the PTSD, whatever?
It really depends how deep the trauma goes, or how intricate it is. I would say macro experiences like ayahuasca or a large ceremonial dose of psilocybin can actually root out like a lot of trauma. But again, it takes a lot of integration work alongside the ceremony to really help you anchor and embody the practices that you learn like from the ceremony. Because a lot of the trauma is like in our body. It's like nested and like it's locked in our body. But the psychedelic, whether it's ayahuasca or psilocybin, they kind of go in and kind of unlock it from our body and kind of bring it to the surface. And so it helps us deal with it there, but it's really up to us to like, okay, this is what I have, this is what I've become more aware of. How can I start to embody the lessons and start to be kind to my body when I do feel kind of this trigger, like all of that stuff. So it's like it really requires like deep embodiment after the ceremony to really get results.
Yeah, I kind of like the mushroom. I mean, the psilocybin. I feel like it is, when you were talking, I just wanted to share this insight that came while you were talking, that this guy, person was having a problem and like dealing with the thing in the work and all, and she was microdosing or something. What I thought was that, like me, sometimes I can feel energy a lot, and that's what happens. It's like like maybe I'm a healer and maybe summoned by disguise or whatever it is. But if somebody is near my presence, which is like physical presence mostly, like 6 feet, 7 feet, 8 feet away, I can feel sometimes their energy, or maybe their projection
Mm.
of their whatever they're projecting. And maybe they're projecting at me, so I can even feel more. But anyhow, I was just thinking that the frequency of psilocybin when you're microdosing is what actually is protecting you, because the frequency is so high enough that it
Mm.
feels like not a bubble but a barrier to lower frequency maybe.
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting idea because I would say like when you're kind of in the frequency of psilocybin, it's a lot more like embodied and you are kind of connected with your more authentic sense of self. So you're more likely to establish like better boundaries with people, even energetic boundaries. And so I think like there's something to that. I do think when we're kind of embodying kind of the wisdom, or or attuned to the energy of the mushrooms, I think there is something to be said for um being able to filter out some of the noise that we typically get affected by. And sometimes we get affected by through our nervous system, and our nervous system kind of like it gets heightened from like other people kind of maybe projecting their energy, or like being around kind of, people who have more of like a static electric field, for example. But um, I would say you're onto something that I think, mushrooms can for sure help regulate that type of thing. So I love that. Like that's a very interesting point.
One more question, one last question. Would it
Yeah, yeah.
healing, you think? Because I think, I feel like the mushroom was calling. Well, I was interested in mushroom is because I feel like I am not only like trying to live the next chapter of my life in a sense,
Mm,
I want to embody it. So I'm trying to embody it now, and and it feels overwhelming because like how are we gonna embody the next level, because it is next level anyway. But it's like the embodiment part, which the patterns of your body, patterns of your subconscious and unconscious, is very about like the safety mechanism, like you are safe when this and that happens. But when you come out of it, then you're like, your body reacts, your mind reacts, your subconscious, your energy body reacts. And I feel like now it is maybe helping me to connect with my body even more, and
hmm
grounding. I feel like one thing that I really, it will help me is grounding. It's not that I'm ungrounded. It's just like I want to, with that vision, I want to be embodied, not just
mm.
floating around with the vision. So, yeah, do you think it will help in grounding? That's what I was curious.
Yeah, yeah. So what I would say, plant medicines definitely uh during the actual plant medicine experience itself, there is very ungrounding because it's like, kind of focuses our energy kind of upward. Whereas like when we're actually kind of in a sober state, when we're not like influenced by plant medicines, we're typically more earthly grounded. But when we're microdosing, for instance, we can be grounded but still get insights, kind of get those like flow of insights at the same time. That's kind of why I like microdosing, because if your goal is to still be grounded in your body, I think microdosing is a really good way of still doing that, but like receiving kind of wisdom from the spirits. um, and I would also say, uh, for a lot of plant medicine, um, the I think a lot of people, again, going back to like our earlier conversation, a lot of people go into plant medicines thinking like it's going to be like that quick fix for them, but really it's about finding like the supplemental resources and the synergistic tools alongside plant medicine that will help us embody that wisdom. So, for example, if your goal is to feel more grounded in your body, feel more centered and more regulated in your nervous system, doing something like microdosing with psilocybin, but then also finding a nervous systems regulation coach that can help you do that like on a regular basis. And so start to not only gather the wisdom and the insight from the medicine and start applying it, but then also do the homework and I'll do the work with like some other like resource that's not just plant medicine that can help you do that. When one example could be finding like a good somatic healer, or somatic therapist, or a nervous systems coach that could really help you start to embody that wisdom. So that way you can make it to that next level that you're referring to. So I kind of like the synergistic applications of other things to combine with plant medicine use, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 1000%. It is not the savior, rather it is just assistance. And I feel that that's very complete in a sense, like when I say that I am the healer,
Yep.
everyone is assisting and supporting me, but I choose my path, and that's the empowered way of seeing the
Yeah.
human journey, Yeah.
You got it, Deepa. I love that. Yeah, we are our own healers, I will say. So I think that's really a big lesson that mushrooms have taught me is that like I'm empowered to make my own decisions around my body and my healing path. And so that's why I love them so much, is because they provided me that wisdom. And I think you're right on the money there.
Yeah, and I want to say I am actually energy healer, but I see that energy healing goes only to energy, but you can still assist yourself with other tools. And we are also a physical being, which we deal with physical people around, and yeah, energy healing is good, but I think there is ways of healing that is just like maybe different layers of your being, healing and not even healing, recalibrating different layers of your being when you whenever you need them. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, it's all about the journey and how we can, be our own healers and using these mushroom spirits as our allies in that process. It's like very powerful. Um, but with that, I know we're like 30 minutes over. I have to hop off here like in the next minute, but I just want to thank you all so much for your questions. It's like was such a engaging session tonight. And so I really thank you all for, listening and providing your curiosity and your questions. I think these are all great. And I can't wait to share out this replay and recording with everyone because it was such a really great conversation. So thank you all so much again. And I hope you all have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you so much for your dedication and your enthusiasm.
Yeah.
It's contagious. I love it. Thank you. Really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
In some way, I kind of embody like the character of mushrooms in a way. I'm just like, yeah, okay, fun, all this stuff, but I can go deep too. So just
Perfect.
yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank
Okay.
you so much, everyone.
All
And if you have any
right. Thank you
questions
so
about the
much.
course, just let me know.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you all. Good night.